When that period of doubt and struggle and frustration comes, you're like, well, here it is. And it kind of is a sign of good things coming. I feel like when you're in that struggle period, it's like that's normally the precursor to a breakthrough.
Hey y'all, I'm Ryan Devlin, and welcome to the Struggle Climbing Show, where I talk with elite climbers about their struggles and breakthroughs in training, nutrition, tactics, and mental game. And today we are chalking up for a chat with an absolute crusher, Paige Claassen. Now, Paige's climbing youth was spent on the comp circuit, and then around age 19, she focused her impressive talents to rock, and she has just been blazing since then. She quickly ascended through the grades outdoors with a passion for nails-hard historical routes, including Just Do It, the first 14C or 8C plus in the US, Necessary Evil, a 14C test piece put up by Chris Sharma in the VRG, to Algorithm, an incredibly challenging 14C/D in the Finns, that you might have heard Jonathan Segrist talking about recently in our chat, and also a handful of 14D or 9A routes that are wildly different in style. I'm talking about Kryptonite in Colorado, put up by Tommy Caldwell, to Dreamcatcher in Squamish, put up by Chris Sharma. Paige has many FAs and FFAs to her name, and surely many more to come. She is so impressive on the rock, and in life, she's got a lot going on as well. She's got a toddler, which has forced her to be all the more efficient in her training and climbing time, which I personally found incredibly relatable as a dad and somebody who's working, really hard all the time. And I think you're going to find that really relatable as well. Even if you don't have kids, it's all about time management. And if you think parenthood is slowing Paige down, well, you're soon going to hear that is definitely not the case. In fact, Paige just recently sent her hardest boulder problem to date, a V13 called the Quintessential, in a day. Actually, just in a couple of hours, when she was able to just sneak away for a little bit while her kiddo was napping. So impressive. We get into all of that in this convo, which covers everything from how she trains her fingers on the wall, to how she builds project endurance in just a couple of weeks, to her unique diet and perspective on nutrition, and so much more. Let's go. Oh man, my heart is just so full as I record this intro here because I just got back from a whirlwind magical weekend in Yosemite. You probably saw me posting about it on Instagram. If you didn't, I've got some stories and stuff up there. I was out in Los Angeles for work about a week ago and I had the weekend free. So I torched up to the Valley of Shadow and Light and I made the most of every single moment. You guys, I hiked to the top of Sentinel Dome to see the sunset over the big stone, El Cap. I bouldered in Camp 4 and even pulled onto Midnight Lightning, possibly the most famous boulder in the world. It is way out of my league, but man, just to pull onto the same first couple of moves that so many titans of the sport have done, from John Backer to Lynn Hill to Dean Potter and all the way up to Adam Ondra and just so many others that have spent time in the valley there. It was the absolute coolest. And then I hiked up to the base of El Cap and I felt all the feels. I mean, I was super emotional at the base there. I posted some pictures about that as well. Just looking up at the most impressive piece of granite in the world. So storied, so much history. It was just incredible. And then I spent time with a couple crushers who have done impressive things on the big stone there. Jordan Cannon, just after he finished his second rope solo of El Cap in a week. Freaking mega. And then I also hung out with Alex Honnold for a little bit just before he set a new El Cap rope solo speed record. And fun fact, I was actually in the valley when Alex free soloed the free rider back in, God, what was that, 10 years ago now. And I didn't know him then. I didn't see him, but I just happened to be in Yosemite when he did that. So it was cool to be back in the valley, spending time with him as well. I also bivvied in a hammock behind Camp 4 because all of the other sleeping options were taken, all the legal options were taken, so I just kind of hiked into the woods and strung up my hammock and got a bunch of mosquito bites on my face, and it was amazing. And maybe the highlight of the weekend was climbing my first Yosemite multi-pitch, a super classic Royal Robbins route called the Nutcracker. It's maybe 400 or 500 feet tall. It was 5 pitches of just so much fun and just the right level of spice for me as I'm, more solidly into sport climbing these days. And it had been a while since I had plugged gear. So to be honest, my first lead was a little bit messy. I unintentionally ran out 50 feet because the one piece that I had placed came out. But by my second lead, on the classic final pitch of the route, I felt a lot better. I was placing gear a heck of a lot better. It has this really cool and somewhat heady mantle move that starts up the last pitch, and I just had an absolute blast. Thank you to Chen Chen and Watson, who welcomed me into their party. I had so much fun with you guys. Thank you so much. If you have a chance to get out to the valley, or really just anywhere out in nature that's awe-inspiring, even if you only have 48 hours like I did, you can pack a ton in. I hope you have some great adventures this summer. This episode is supported by MAXIM ropes, and if you take as many whips as I do, you want to be sure that your rope is amazing, and I'm telling you guys, my Airliner is hands down the nicest rope that I have ever tied into. The 9.1 millimeter MAXIM Airliner is an ultralight and skinny lead line, but that featherweight doesn't sacrifice an ounce of performance, y'all. It is frequently referred to as the indestructible Airliner due to its longevity, which is awesome for a few reasons. First, peace of mind. So, real talk here, I struggle with fear of falling, and I just want full confidence that my rope has got me, and the Airliner, which is triple certified, goes above and beyond in that department. I love it. And then second, I don't want to have to shell out for a new rope every season. They're expensive, and MAXIM goes the distance here, which also means that it has a smaller impact on our environment, which is really cool. And then lastly, the Airliner is so light, it makes the approach a breeze. It feeds through my gear incredibly smoothly, so I can save all of that energy to flail around on my project. Not MAXIM's fault, but I'm working on it. So if you're looking for a super lightweight, ultra thin, and extremely durable cord, you have found it. Check it out at your local gear shop or online. And you can see all of the ropes that MAXIM has to offer by hitting that link in your show notes there or popping over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/MAXIM. Y'all, I just want to give a little shout out here to PhysiVantage, the official climbing nutrition sponsor of The Struggle. I have been a paying customer of PhysiVantage for a couple of years now, and this stuff is truly the best of the best if y'all want to level up your training and your performance, and I know you do. I'll give you a little window into my routine here. There are a few PhysiVantage products that I take every day, whether I climb or not. First, I start my day with their superfood greens, which taste delicious and is just the best way for me to get going in the morning. It supports my immune system and my digestive health. I just always feel like I'm good as long as I start my day with their greens. I also take their magnesium supplement every day, MAG-ATP, which, as it turns out, and I didn't know this, a lot of people are deficient in, and among other things, it helps me to improve my sleep, which of course is really important for recovery. Lastly, I take their supercharged collagen every day as well to support my tendons and ligaments so that I can train harder and recover faster. It is all science-backed stuff. It tastes delicious, which I think is also very important. And I can also say with absolute sincerity that I'm training harder right now than I ever have before, and I have never felt better. And I attribute that a lot to PhysiVantage and how it's helping me to recover and perform my best. So if you're looking for that extra edge, hit the link in your podcast app or use checkout code STRUGGLE15 to save 15% off any full-price nutrition order at PhysiVantage.com. I really think you're going to feel the difference. Check it out. And lastly, just a huge thanks to all you patrons and subscribers out there. So many new patrons coming aboard recently. I really, really appreciate it. Y'all are awesome. I just dropped a super insightful bonus episode with Paige just for you, and I will tell you all more about that in a little bit here. But first, let's pull hard with a real dream catcher, Paige Claassen. Are you back home right now?
Yep, we're at home in Colorado. Just kind of got our routine going with normal life with a toddler and training and injuries and all that.
Yeah, you were in Smith for a while, right?
I was in Smith for 2 weeks, yeah. It was a quick trip. It was our first time having childcare. My parents came with us. So it was kind of like a test to see what it was like. It was amazing.
Yeah, childcare is the best.
Yeah, it's awesome. We could actually go climbing.
How old's your kiddo?
She'll be 2 in June.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's right around the corner here. Well, I've got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. So it's funny how you forget the phases. Like, I'm like, what was 2 like? And it's like, I don't even remember. You know, it's like, it's a protection mechanism. It's like,
it was a blur.
Parental amnesia.
Yep, totally. Oh, it's really fun though. I feel like we're in a cool phase.
Well, I'm really psyched to dive in. Do you have any questions or anything before we do jump in?
No, excited to talk with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cool. Well, likewise. I was just talking with Eric Hurst yesterday. He just arrived. I'm in Kentucky. I live in Kentucky, and he just arrived at the Red Yeah, he was singing your praises. He just said the nicest things about you, and he's such a good guy. He and I have been climbing together for a while now.
Yeah, he's awesome. He really takes care of his athletes, and I feel like I've been able to learn so much through him.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. Yeah, he's like such a scientist. He's always teaching. I learn so much from him all the time, whether it's climbing or nutrition and all that. So yeah, we'll probably dive into it and explore some of that in the nutrition chapter here. But first, you know what? We'll just start where we always start here, and that's with struggle. And what's your relationship with struggle as a rock climber, Paige?
I think I'm pretty used to it. And so it's become normalized, which almost takes away from part of the struggle because you come to expect it. I think my style of climbing, there's almost like a formula to it now. It's like I love to sport climb, I love to project. Whether I'm trying something that is my style or is not my style, I almost know what to expect. And so when that period of like doubt and struggle and frustration comes, you're like, well, here it is. And it kind of is a sign of good things coming. I feel like when you're in that struggle period, it's like that's normally the precursor to a breakthrough or success. And so I kind of welcome it. And I think part of the reason is I have the support I need to get through that struggle, whether it's the right climbing partners or balance in my life, being able to focus on something other than climbing and put things in perspective, like leaning into cooking or other hobbies I have. I think all of those things help you balance the struggle and not get sucked into that like doomsday vortex. I think that's really important. And I've always been pretty good about not getting too sucked in there. It's like when the climbing day's over, you move on to other parts of life, and that's really helpful for me. So then the struggle is kind of localized to the crack. Yeah,
that's cool to hear. Just that you're able to kind of compartmentalize that part, that aspect. It is interesting, as a professional climber, where your livelihood and in some regards your identity is swept up in performance, that you're still able to kind of set that aside and essentially like clock out at the end of the day and then just move on to other things. It doesn't like you don't continue to obsess over those things like when you're really in it.
No, which is odd because I think I can be kind of an obsessive person. Like I can get stuck in my head and struggle with anxiety and putting pressure on myself. But related to climbing, I am sort of good at compartmentalizing. And I think it's because I've always had a lot of other things going on in life besides climbing, whether when I was young, it was school or, it could be relationships or now being a mom. And so there's just a lot more to life than climbing. And that helps me be the best climber I can be. Those periods of life where it's been really focused on climbing, that's when I've climbed my worst. And so I use that as motivation. I think I climb a lot less than most climbers. I take a lot of rest. There's not pressure to climb 5 days a week or 6 days a week. And I think that's just experience. It's what I've found works for me. And so I'm like, this is my track, and I'm pretty confident on that track.
Oh, good. I'm excited to peel back on a lot of this. And I especially really liked that you're equating struggle almost now with a positivity of a sign of good things to come. And of course, that's earned over time. That now you recognize as part of your process when you get into the trenches there and you're struggling. You just know that it's about to lead to something good, it sounds like. Maybe not always, but often.
Not always. I was just listening to this podcast about something different, unrelated to climbing. I think it was about pain, but they had more eloquent words. But you either have experiences that are positive and kind of affirm your track, or negative experiences that are setbacks. And I think over time, having these projects and going through that process and then seeing it work out, each route I've sent is proof that I'm capable of something that initially felt impossible. And so I definitely use that each time I go into a project, because it is really easy to go in and get overwhelmed, either about how hard something is or whether you're performing poorly or have 3 horrible days in a row where you've made backwards progress or whatever it is. Like, those are the struggles. But being like, I've been here before. Like, we've done this. This is nothing new. And like, you always come out the other side, whether you send or not. Like, I think even those times when we don't send, you're always learning something. And that's a huge win in itself. So whether I look back at my sins or the routes I failed on and haven't returned to and succeeded on, it's like I learned a lot in those experiences, and those made me a better climber. So that's valuable.
Oh, that's wonderful. I appreciate the perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Well, let's geek out for a little bit here and talk about training. You said you're back home in Colorado now. You're getting into a training mode. I want to hear what that looks like for you now, but we'll enter into it as we typically do through the lens of struggle and what is or has been a struggle for you in the training department.
Well, my training looks a lot different than many people's. Mine's very unstructured. I'm quite an intuitive climber and not very analytical. So I do what feels right, what feels good to me. And a good training session for me is where I'm trying really hard for the whole session. It's not structured around how many reps or how many of this or what number of which grade or how many hours. It's just like what feels right to my body. And again, I think that's experiences of that's what's worked over time.
When we're talking about like kind of trying hard, what does that practically look like?
It's like applying myself to a move that is going to take like every ounce of my power. You know, I'm going to have to recruit everything I have to get through that move and probably, you know, take 20 or 30 tries to do the move. So really projecting within the training session. And I think that helps me to apply that try hard outside and be efficient so that each day I'm outside working on a project, I'm making the most of however many hours I'm out there because I'm doing the same thing in my training sessions. So I'm not having to turn like 50 kilterboard V6 laps into like one really good red point burn on a sport project. I'm just kind of doing the same thing in the gym that I'm doing outside. Like I'm applying myself and trying my absolute hardest to do moves that feel impossible at first.
And did you go through a phase where you were more analytical and measuring weighted hangs and these kinds of things that people like to geek out about, myself included, and then found this style to be more for you? Or have you just kind of always trained in this manner? It's more about like effort and just kind of feeling where you're at.
It's always been more about effort. It's odd because I think I do have a fairly analytical personality. Like I really loved school. I liked studying. I liked the structure of that. I liked knowing exactly what I was going to do each day. And so it's kind of odd that my climbing persona is quite different from my like real life persona. Yeah. But no, I've just never, for example, since I started climbing outside and projecting, I've never been good at remembering beta, like something as basic as beta. I've really struggled to remember it, let alone like refine it. Normally when I'm up on the wall, it's what feels right in my body. Like I'm doing moves intuitively and finding body positions that feel right. But when I come down, it's rare that I can explain what I did or even the sequence to someone. So I'm not a great partner in that sense where, you know, you come down and you talk about beta and work through moves. And I struggle with that. It's kind of like, well, I don't remember what feet I used up there, but I wish I could explain like how this came about. And maybe it's from a lack of applying that analytical skill throughout my climbing. And so it's kind of just become this more intuitive thing. But I think climbing intuitively can be a skill as well, where you're really in tune with your body and body positions and what feels like it's going to be effective. You know, I can pull on the wall and before I even attempt a move, I can kind of evaluate within myself whether that's the right body position.
Right.
And so it's something that's worked for me. I think I probably could get a lot of value out of, you know, weighted hangs, like writing down how much weight and seeing my improvements over time. But the flip side of that is I'm not like super prone to injury, but I think part of it is because of my approach to climbing with a lot of rest, and most of my training is climbing. And so I think when you get kind of obsessed with numbers and like seeing those incremental improvements on paper, to me, that's like, ooh, that seems like a great way for me to get injured. Whereas when I'm on the wall with my own body weight and kind of doing what feels right, it feels like a safe space to push myself. So I think it's a combination of all those little things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when you are sessioning like that, you're training at the gym, pulling really hard moves, are you trying to send a certain amount of grades or are you trying to even send? Like what is that? What are your goals, I guess, as you walk into a training session at the gym?
My goal is to send. Like I have friends or climbing partners who they don't care how hard something is. It could be like the grade could be well above something they feel like they could send, but just trying one move is really fun and exciting. And that's the goal in itself. I'm not like that. I do want to send, and that is the goal. But I'm not like, oh, I need to get 10 purples in today or like 10 V11s on the kilter board or whatever. I'm going to keep trying boulders that feel pretty limit, but possible. And I'm giving, let's say, between like 4 and 12 attempts on each one.
Is that like, are you resting? How much are you resting in between attempts?
Not a lot in between attempts. My sessions are pretty efficient. So say I'll be in the gym for like 2 hours or 3 hours would be a really long session for me. Part of that's like time constraints as a mom. Part of that's personal preference, a lot of different things. But I'm not resting a ton when I'm in the gym. It could just be like a couple minutes between attempts, which isn't really very long when you're trying at your limit. But I take a lot of rest days. So like often I'll climb 1 day on, 2 days off. Like that's a typical climbing schedule for me, which I think for a lot of people, they would kind of scoff at that or be frustrated by how little climbing that is. But if I'm going climbing, whether it's at the gym training or outside, I want to be performing my absolute best. And I'm only going to perform my absolute best if I'm well rested. And I think that applies to the type of climbing I do as well. Like projecting sport climbs, I don't need to be capable of a ton of volume. Like I'm not trying my hardest 10 pitches up. I'm just like starting from the ground each time and giving 2 big red point burns each day. And so like quality over quantity, essentially, is what I'm going for.
Yeah. And then on those rest days, so if day A, you're training and maybe you're going to take 2 days off, are you doing any other work during those days? Or is it fully like Netflix and momming?
Well, Netflix and momming don't really go together, but it's just momming.
True.
So you're never really resting. And that's something that's changed since becoming a mom. My recovery is a lot worse because you just don't get that downtime. Like there's no option to be like, I'm so sore and exhausted today. I'm just going to really chill out. You're still like chasing someone around, and we're on the bike path and on trails, like playing, going for walks, walking the dog. My daughter's really into her Strider bike now. So we were just out this morning, but we probably spend 2 or 3 hours a day, like walking around on the trails, which, you know, I guess some people would call like active.
Yeah,
it's not sitting and chilling, but I'm not like cross training. I'm not doing core workouts or going for recovery runs or anything like that. So,
yeah. Well, I'm curious how you are training like forearm endurance, because you say you most of your sessions you're going in and you're like pulling these hard boulder moves. Maybe you're on the wall for 5 seconds or 12 seconds or something like that, and then coming off, taking a couple minutes, going again. So you're really working that top end strength and power, it sounds like. But you love to climb routes, and that oftentimes requires some sort of endurance and recovery on route and this kind of thing. And are you focusing on that energy system at all?
Not really. So typically before a sport climbing trip, like 3 weeks before I leave for the trip, I'll train endurance. So routes twice a week. And in the gym, I'll do doubles. I would say I used to do triples, but haven't done that in a long time. And just trying hard routes in a row, like I want to fall off because I can't hold on anymore. And I think 2 to 3 weeks is enough for me to get my endurance to a level that is suitable for a project. Knowing that, first of all, the type of projects I like are pretty power focused. So really hard moves with good rests. I'm really not good at like pure endurance climbing. Like the Red River Gorge is a really tough place for me because you get so pumped. And so that's a style of climbing I'm not good at all. It's fun for a time, but that's not normally what I'm going to choose for my hardest projects. So I prefer powerful routes with big rests. And then when you first start a really hard project, you are hanging so much. So you're not utilizing your endurance at all. And depending on how long you plan to work that project, you know, often you can't plan those things, but say it's a 4-week trip, 2 weeks are probably going to be spent like going bolt to bolt and working moves, maybe linking 1 or 2 or 3 bolts at a time. That's not requiring a lot of endurance. It's also not helping you maintain the endurance you just trained. So I mostly build my endurance on a project. And so, each day you're on, ideally you link a couple more moves together. And so each day your endurance is building like incrementally for that specific route on those moves. And that's sufficient. I think that's also because I've been climbing for so long. I've been climbing for 25 years. And so I think my forearms have like a base level of performance that's suitable for the style of climbing I'm doing. And my weakness and the reason I fall or fail on a project is always going to be power. And so that's what I need to focus on.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we started this by saying that you weren't very analytical, but you are quite analytical, clearly. It's just...
I suppose, in my own way, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate it. Well, we got to get you out to the Red. It's a great place for families.
It is. I'd really like to come. I've been a couple times, but I'd love to come back with my family and just like have a good time. It's so pretty out there.
It's just
like
so
I really
beautiful.
do like the Red.
And there's a great 9A out here that Alex Magos put up called Zoolander that's real short. It's like 35 feet, just straight power endurance. So
wow,
you could probably tick that one off in short order and then go get flamed on some 5K.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't end. Yeah,
fun regardless.
Cool. Let's talk about nutrition for a little bit here. This is I'm actually really excited to dive into this chapter with you, but I'll open it up as I always do and kind of enter through the lens of struggle. And where have you struggled in your nutrition?
I would say nutrition and food is not a huge source of struggle in my life. I have gone through a brief period when I was around 19, 20, where I dropped a lot of weight by choice for climbing performance, and it went very poorly. I think in climbing, we often see athletes drop weight and then experience a lot of success. That is not what happened for me. And so that I just use that as proof that that was not my path. I need fuel. I need to eat. I need sugar. I need fat. I need protein. I need all the things. And so I don't have any sort of restrictions in my diet. And I love food. It doesn't have any negative connotations for me. I eat what I want, but it's not just like just eating ice cream all day. I'm not craving the worst vices and just being like, I eat what I want all the time and it works for me. Right. It's like I eat what I want, but I often want really good things, and that's effective. So that's the first answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that there is kind of a history in climbing where lighter is better and this kind of thing. We've been moving away from that, at least more publicly. I think it still very much permeates the sport, of course, when you're talking about strength to weight ratio. But it is interesting to hear that you experimented in that. I've experimented in it. I think probably a lot of people have tried to like cut some pounds as they're trying to like get into the project. I mean, I'm just a weekend warrior, so like I've got pounds to cut. But
maybe not
for you.
I feel like everyone thinks they do, but you're like, well, there's a lot of unhealthy examples out there.
For sure. And like, I mean, I've got like, the dad beer belly. It's like, for me, I'm not optimized. Let's put it that way, Paige. But it sounds like, when you were 19, as you were saying, you were optimized. You tried to cut further and immediately the results were negative. You're saying like you didn't even see like a temporary benefit or whatever, like some people get sucked into. It was just like very clear to you. It sounds like that was not the way.
Mm-hmm. I was immediately exhausted. I had no energy. I had no power. I had no motivation. I was like sad and depressed. And I know we're going to get into the mental component, but for me, like that's the biggest key to my climbing is my psyche. And so if I'm just kind of like bummed out all the time and thinking of my next meal that's not even going to be very good, like that is no life for me. And so I will add to that like 7 or 8 years ago, I had planned a trip to Flatanger and decided I wanted to try Odin's Eye, which is really steep and powerful. And it was kind of my first foray into that style of climbing. Previously, I had focused on what I was good at, which is like more vertical, slightly overhung, crimpy, technical climbing.
Odin's Eye is a 14C in Flatanger?
Yeah, BC.
A hard, steep Flatanger climbing, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, but it was going to require me to like really rise to the challenge. And I had been with my now husband for maybe 2 or 3 years at the time. And he had encouraged me to really change my diet, not because he was interested in diet, but because he didn't want to eat the things I was eating. So it was like typical sport climber, you know, eating low-fat yogurt and low-fat milk. And, you know, just when you go to the store and there's an option between low-fat and full-fat, choosing the lower-fat option. And he was like, that's disgusting. I don't want to eat, you know, I want to eat like cream and butter, and like he bakes croissants and all into the full-fat stuff. And so I changed my diet pretty drastically, and it correlated with this trip to Flatinger, where I made a big effort to start weight training and training power and eating a bunch of protein. And I kind of just went for it, and it was really effective. It did change my body a bit. Like I feel like I built more lean muscle and maybe lost a bit of fat, which is odd because I went from eating low fat to full fat. And I won't say that I was eating like a high protein, high fat diet, but in my mind, I was focusing on those categories and like trying to eat a lot more fat and more protein. But I don't want people to get the idea that it was some like, you know, paleo. I wasn't on a diet plan or anything. And so that huge increase in protein in my diet, I think it just was the perfect match for training power, and it worked really well. I performed well in Flatinger, and ever since that trip, I've really preferred more powerful routes, and my diet has stuck to that like higher fat, higher protein goals. So that's kind of what I try and focus on. That said, I still eat a ton of carbs, but I'm making sure, you know, we eat oats in the morning and I put a ton of butter in it. Like we go through a crazy amount of butter in our house. Yeah, in addition to like the good fats everyone talks about, like avocado and nuts and all that is great. Right. But we kind of just eat it all.
I recall a photo that you posted. This is a while back, I think, just on your Instagram. But it was like a picture of like 20 sticks of butter. Yeah, I think you were on a trip somewhere.
That was at home. We do a lot of baking, but yeah, we buy butter in bulk and it moves through the house quickly. So
this is cool. This is a refreshing part of this nutrition chapter here. And, you know, you've specifically identified protein as well while you were training for Odin's Eye and looking to put on more muscle for that steeper style of climbing. But just overall, it sounds like an emphasis on protein. Do you have like a grams per day goal, and how do you achieve that?
At the time, I didn't know anything about like grams per day. It was more that I had been eating very little protein as a result of this like kind of lower fat mentality. And so it was also a big lifestyle change because my husband's from South Africa and we were living there at the time. And they have a huge meat culture, especially in the rural farming areas that we were in. And so the availability of high quality meat was just, it's right there. That's what's available. And so eating a lot more meat in addition to, like I always ate eggs, but eggs don't really have as much protein as people think. It's really hard to get a whole lot of protein through eggs.
It's like 6 grams of protein per egg, I think. So you have to eat a handful of eggs a day, I guess, too.
Yeah, or like 2 dozen eggs or something.
Right.
Now I know a bit more, mostly because one of my close friends, Neely Quinn, is a nutritionist. And so we talk a lot about, you know, these types of things and optimizing nutrition. And so I would say I'm not counting each day because I just know that my diet ticks this number. So I'm like good with where I'm at, but it's certainly over 100 grams of protein a day. And that's like obviously still a pretty rough number for those that are really like trying to track that. But between like meat and eggs and chickpeas and protein powder, collagen, I take a lot of collagen powder, and that has 10 grams per scoop. The PhysiVantage collagen does. I'm doing that twice a day right now, so that's 20 grams right there. So it adds up quickly if you're eating in those high protein categories.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned PhysiVantage collagen there, which you also mentioned having some injuries. I don't know if they go hand in hand right now. Are you doubling up on collagen right now because you're trying to recover from some connective tissue injuries, or do you just always take that? Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, normally I take collagen every day, but just 1 serving is sufficient. But I'm struggling with elbow tendonitis in both elbows. And the one is like not traditional tennis or golfers. It's kind of this weird like in between that I can't figure out. And so 2 servings of collagen a day to just try and give my body that extra boost.
Nice. And then what about any guilty pleasures? We started talking about saying you don't eat ice cream for every meal, but what about sometimes? What do you go to? What's your go-to, whether you're celebrating or just, we want to eat some junk just because it's fun?
Yeah, I mean, I eat junk every day. Yeah, it's not,
but
well, I don't really believe in like celebration treats. It's like that's pretty restrictive. And I think the mentality that goes along with that can be fairly unhealthy depending on how you're doing it. So treats are just part of like my daily eating, and I don't feel guilty about them. So they're not really guilty pleasures. They're just pleasures. For example, this afternoon, I found a recipe for sesame miso Rice Krispie treats. So I'm going to try and make those. I like just finding funky recipes that are weird and different. I'm really into this site right now called Little Fat Boy Frankie. And I think he is Taiwanese, and he does Taiwanese takes on American classics. And there's desserts and like savory meals, and everything I've made is amazing. So I just like to try weird stuff. So that's what I'm going to cook this afternoon.
I love it. Oh, good. Well, if it works out well, I'll link the recipe in the show notes.
Okay.
If it crashes and burns, we'll link to a different effort recipe.
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Well, thank you. I really liked that insight. That was refreshing, and like also maybe one of the most mouth-watering nutrition chapters I've had on the show here. Like everything we just talked about has made me very hungry. So
I think it's really important to fuel your body. And I think sometimes when we think of fueling our body, we think of just being quote unquote healthy and eating healthy things, salads and protein, and like stick to that. But nutrition can be really delicious. And I don't think, it's different for everyone, but food makes me really happy. And when I'm happy, I climb well. So those things go together.
This episode is sponsored by Crimped. Crimp offers 75 different workouts created by world-class coaches and climbers totally for free, you guys. I've been using Crimped for years to log my finger strength and endurance assessments so that I can see how effective my training has been going. And I also love how easy and motivating it is to program my weekly training right there in the app with loads of proven workouts to choose from so that I can just keep things fresh. Look, if you're a self-coached climber, I am telling you, the absolute best and easiest way that I've ever found to train and stay on track is with Crimped. They group their workouts, y'all, into categories. So endurance, power endurance, strength and conditioning, boom, no confusion. I'm telling you, I use it all the time, and I am definitely far more consistent with my training when I've got the app keeping me honest and on track, and it just feels so good at the end of the week to close out those bars. You can hit that link in your notes or go to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/crimped, CRIMPD, to download it for free and take your training to new heights. Shout out to SCARPA, the official shoe sponsor of the Struggle Climbing Show, and my favorite shoes. Oh my gosh, I've been climbing in SCARPAs for a decade, and I absolutely love the way that they fit and how they perform on rock and at the gym. The Instinct VSs have been a game changer for me, you guys, on the steep climbing that I'm doing over here at the Red. They just toe in and stick to everything. And also on the Moonboard and the sets at the gym, I gotta say, I'm just able to move with such confidence and put more weight on my feet, which is such a good thing because my fingers are pretty weak and I can use all the help that I can get. So whether you're a weekend warrior like me or a pro like Sean Rabitou, Nina Williams, Nathaniel Coleman, Alex Puccio, Jordan Cannon, Maddie Hong, oh my gosh, what a team. SCARPA has got you. They've been sustainably making the best footwear for climbers, trail runners, skiers, and hikers since 1938. I love my approach shoes. I love my climbing shoes. And I think you will too. You can shop the whole collection over at scarpa.com. SCARPA, no place too far. This episode is supported by Boulder Bear's caffeinated gummy bears. Oh my gosh, I've already got a smile on my face just saying it. I love these things so much. They taste like candy and they kick like coffee. They are legit fantastic. I'm pretty sensitive to caffeine personally. If I take too much, it makes me jittery, kind of gets in my head. That is not what I want when I'm on a route. And so what's cool about these Boulder Bears is that each one contains 20 milligrams of caffeine, plus a little bit of collagen, so that I can perfectly dial in the boost that I want and also take care of my tendons while I'm at it. So like if I'm gonna have a long day at the crag, maybe I'll have one an hour and it'll just keep me like focused up with a little bit of energy that'll last all day. Or if I'm gonna go hit like a moonboard session or a bouldering session really hard, I'll have like 4 or 5 gummies all at once and boom, It gives me that hit, that boost, that focus right when I need it. I also love that they're just tiny and they're light, so they don't weigh down my pack on the hike in or my stomach when I'm trying to climb at my limit. There's no like liquid, like, coffee or Red Bull sloshing around when I'm trying to pull hard. I love these Boulder Bears so much. You can score a free refillable travel pouch plus 15% off when you order a bundle right now using code STRUGGLE over at boulderbears.com. They're a small company. I know the owner. It's such a cool thing they're doing. The link is right there in your podcast player. Boulder Bears, all flash, no crash. Let's shift here and focus on tactics and technique. There's a few climbs here I want to bring up, but I'll open it up to you first. And when it comes to technique, when it comes to tactics as a climber, specifically thinking about outdoors now, is there an area that you've struggled?
I think I would say my main struggle with projecting in the past has been that I get really sucked into projects and I will only apply myself to that project. And if you do that for too long, you get really weak. Like climbing on only one route for weeks on end makes you pretty good at those specific moves and really weak at everything else. And eventually just weak in general and unable to apply yourself to your project. So I've learned over time that it's really important for me to climb other things, whether it's just an extra route at the end of the day that's something I've never done before, or that not every day outside needs to be on my project. Just to have a little more balance and keep my body well-rounded is the best way to keep strong while projecting.
Yeah, that's a cool perspective, because you did note that when you go out and you kind of get into like projecting phase, I think you don't train, right? You don't train much. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that you're on a project and then supplementing with some exercises that are hitting the moves or the muscles that you're not doing. You're actually just trying to find a different route that essentially complements the project in some way.
Yeah, and I'm not even focusing on like, oh, this route is ticking these areas, so I need to find like an extracurricular route that ticks these other boxes. It's just like part of it's mental too. Just projecting is consuming and it can be really frustrating, and remembering that there's so much climbing out there that is fun has been helpful for me over time. It took me a long time to get there though, because I didn't want to spend energy that could go towards my project on something else. But then like proving to myself over and over that actually helps me be a more effective projector made a big difference.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it. I've been slamming my head against my project for a while here out at the Red, and just recently like popped over onto a different thing just as the last part of my warm up, and
okay,
had so much fun on it. And like it was totally different, but like I flashed it and it was a hard grade for me, and
oh cool.
And yeah, I was like so in tunnel vision on the project that just, as you say, kind of like mentally, like it was just like a nice refresher. I think it was probably good for me physically too, but it was just also like really nice to go and clip chains on something, because I haven't clipped chains on things in a long time.
Yeah, it's a good confidence boost as well. Like if you can select a route that, could give you a leg up, it's like go clip chains on something, get a little confidence boost. You flash something that felt like harder than something you'd normally flash, and that gives you confidence you can take over to your project, which is huge.
Well, let's talk about a project, a big project of yours, which was Dreamcatcher. First female ascent. I think Michaela got it a few days after. You all were out there around the same time. Just one of the coolest lines in the world of rock climbing. And I was reading about your work on Dreamcatcher, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the tactic on that one was to low point. You were kind of working the upper crux and then working your way down to like that slab start. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you took on Dreamcatcher tactically.
Sure. I mean, I think that one was pretty unique in that I don't normally go for low points. I think you have to figure out what the project is demanding and like what's the obstacle that's preventing you from sending. So that route specifically starts with a slab, which I really like slab climbing, so that was fun. And then the whole traverse is quite powerful, shouldery powerful. Then you have the pin scar section that is just precise, and it's not the hardest section, but it can there's a lot of space to fumble. And then it culminates in this transition around the corner that is the red point crux, that the holds are just really thin. It's powerful. The feet are really bad. And people fall there like in that section over and over and over. And I knew that people normally get the rest of the route dialed and then just spend forever falling on the top. So when I'm working on the crux of a route, I want to just keep linking more and more moves together. And at some point, it's like, well, if it's at the top of the route, there aren't that many more moves to link above the crux. And so you have to start linking moves below the crux.
Right.
And I think I arrived at that place because I had a couple burns where I just fell at the red point crux. And you're like, okay, I don't want to dig myself into a hole here, physically or mentally. Like when you fall at the same place over and over, it becomes habitual. And so it was a tactic of, I would probably do one red point burn from the bottom each day. And then as I lowered, I would unclip. This is unique to Dreamcatcher because it's like a weird traverse. So unclipping a few bolts back like might not make sense on every route, but
Right.
I would go hang below the crux, rest a minute, and then try from there. And each time I would go like a few moves back to the point that on that route, you can stand on the boulder behind it and stick clip like halfway up the route. So I would just pull up to the halfway point and try from there. So it looked kind of funny, like your belayer and your rope are starting halfway up the route.
Right.
But it's not that much higher off the ground than the start of the route since it's a traverse. So that is a really unique one. And I wouldn't say that's a tactic I've applied on many other projects, but it worked really well on that. And I think did allow me to finish it pretty efficiently because, again, like we were talking about with endurance, I was adding a few more moves on each try. And so your endurance is slowly building up to that point. And then you just have to tack on these bottom moves that you're pretty familiar with at that point.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that look at Dreamcatcher there. You said that's not typical of how you would take on a project then. Are you going ground up red points?
Ground up red point attempts, but also I'm happy to skip through sections. With really powerful routes, you have to be careful of zapping all your power on earlier sections and then not having the power you need to get through the harder upper sections. I think in a lot of folks' minds, it's like, well, but I need to be capable of doing those upper hard moves when I'm tired, so this is good practice. And yes, that does have a place, but also when you're trying to refine a crux that's higher up, like you need every bit of your power just to work through that. So I'm happy to pull through like the whole bottom of a route and just focus on an upper section and really whittle it down. I'll try moves that are hard for me over and over. You know, even if you stick a move that's really hard, it's like stick it 5 times so that your body learns it and it becomes muscle memory. And then next time it will feel easier when you link more moves. I think that's a mental strategy I use as well, that with the tactics I use and trying as hard as I can and rehearsing moves and adding moves, I'm setting myself up so that the next day I come back to a route, I'm stronger. Like I know that I'm a stronger climber the next day I approach a project. And it kind of takes away that mental doubt where you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm capable. Last time it felt so hard. And you're like, well, I'm a different climber than I was yesterday because I'm so much stronger because of the tactics I applied yesterday. And thinking of that as like a little training session. And that just helps me to arrive each day with like a fresh perspective, a fresh body. Like I'm a better climber today.
I've got a couple specifics that I'm excited to ask you about, but where have you struggled in the mental game, in the mindset area, Paige?
I definitely have struggled, but I will say that the mental game, I think, is my strength. Like, of the things I'm good at in climbing, the mental game is like, that's what I have to apply to a hard project. I think what I've struggled with is when those small injuries creep up, knowing when to push through or say, I got to back off, even though I'm psyched and I could push through this and it might work. Being like, okay, this is not good for the long term. And I've had to do that a few times, and it's really disappointing to make that call because you're balancing like all the training you've done to get you to that point, your motivation and your psyche, if that's really high, all the logistics that have to come together to work on a project. And then, you know, if something's feeling tweaked, is it worth it to push through? And I had that a few years ago at Mount Potosi. I wanted to try and climb 515, and that is a place where there are 515s in the US. And my like palm strength, my lumbricals were not prepared for that steep pocketed climbing. And I strained a lumbrical which is like the little muscles in your palm. And I kind of knew, it wasn't like I heard a pop or it wasn't anything sudden. It was just like each day it hurt a little more. But I was psyched. Like I wanted to be there. I wanted to climb this grade. I felt strong, even though like I should have trained more pockets. And to be like, well, this doesn't hurt that bad, but I want to think of myself in the long term and know that this isn't good for my, like the health of my fingers and my hands long term. And to step back and like take on that disappointment.
Well, personally, I find everything up in the Clear Light Cave to be freaking nails hard. So to take on any sort of project there is really, really hard. But yeah, to be able to overcome some of that stoke and hold yourself back, I'm sure is really hard. You mentioned earlier in our conversation some anxiety that you've worked through, and I'm not sure if that's part of being a pro climber and some of the pressures that you face, and if that goes hand in hand with part of the injury there, or maybe that's a separate thing on the mental game altogether, but I'd like to explore that as well.
I mean, I think the anxiety side is less related to climbing. Like, obviously, that ties in with your identity, and climbing is a huge part of my identity. But, like, I tend to get easily overwhelmed sometimes or overstimulated, and those things have gotten worse since becoming a mom, just because there is constant stimulation and, like, this small person to look after. And so I've had to work on ways to, like, calm myself down and refocus and kind of recenter.
I'd love to know how you're doing that, like what tools you implement.
Well, my friend Neely suggested yoga nidra, which is not something I would normally be super into. It's like meditative. It's not really, well, from my perspective, it's not what I would consider yoga. You're just literally laying there and someone's telling you different parts of your body to focus on. It's like on YouTube. But they call it, or it's called like a massage for your nervous system. And it really does feel like that. It's like, I think the girl in the video says it's closing all the windows. Like, consider your brain a computer and you're closing all the windows down to help it reboot. And that's something I need in my life. Like, I keep all the windows open and I'm thinking about what needs to be done here and who needs this. And, you know, my brain's bobbing all over the place. And then I'm not the best version of myself for me, for my kid, for my husband, for anyone. And so to just kind of take a minute to like tap out and not think about anything and like relax my body and feel sensations in each part of my body and kind of like reground has been helpful. Religion is also a big part of who I am. I'm a Christian and rely pretty heavily on my faith and prayer and just knowing that I live life as though God has a plan for me. And so that helps ground me a lot and also like take off a lot of pressure. Like, for example, when I'm on a route, I'll even sometimes, like, if I'm at a rest, shaking out, just, like, say a little prayer, be thankful that I'm in a really cool place, doing something I love with fun people, and, like, help me to be strong and, like, to have some endurance, which I don't normally have. Like, ask for whatever I need to get up that route. And I think people think of religion as being really serious and restrictive and judgmental, and it can be, and that sucks, and I hate that component of it. And that some people subscribe to that component of it. But I think it can also be really freeing and fun. Like, I think the way that I live my life, I believe that God wants us to enjoy life and have a fun time. And so, yeah, I do think he cares about my climbing. Like, not necessarily how I perform, but like he's a part of my climbing. And so, I don't know, it's just a component that helps me not feel so much pressure on myself because like life is bigger than just climbing or just whatever project I'm on.
Right. No, I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. I think I had a conversation with Hazel Finley, and she talks when people are dealing with fear of falling or failure, anxiety, keeping things in perspective, looking at the big picture, bringing gratitude to the crag, and whether somebody has religion or faith or not, or, you know, those are universal components, and you can get them through faith or you can get them through nature or a connection with nature, whatever it is, or all of the above. And having that gratitude and bringing that perspective, that bigger picture, can help us when we're like, you know, just like punting at the top or struggling or whatever, and everything feels like really, you know, grim, but it's, you know, we're just like out in nature climbing rocks, right?
Totally. And I use my family as that too. Like, if I'm struggling on a project and it's cold and kind of miserable and I'm having a bad time and it's not going well, it's It's like, well, I get to go home and hang out with my kid and my husband, and that's awesome. And so I'm never going to sacrifice those things that are important to me for climbing because they're such an important part of me and to me, but they also play a role in my climbing. Like I need those pieces to be the best athlete that I can be, in addition to the million other reasons why my family's important to me.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. One last thing here on the mental game chapter. I had read, earlier in your career where you would talk about not being a boulderer and not wanting to boulder because there's, maybe some fears of falling and these kinds of things. More recently, it looks like you're kind of maybe embracing your inner boulderer. I've seen you
I am.
Sent V13 and you're not just like bouldering, you're like out there crushing. And so I'm curious through the mental kind of lens, how you've been able to overcome some of those earlier fears of bouldering, or maybe there was some other elements involved, but now that you're kind of somewhat a boulderer, not just a rock climber, how did that evolution take place?
I know I am kind of a boulderer nowadays, which is crazy. I've resisted it for so long. My husband's a boulderer, so there's the convenience of it. But I think practice, just, continuing to try and put myself out there. I think motivation has been a big struggle for me in bouldering. Like, I still don't find that much validation, or I don't feel a huge sense of achievement when I top out a boulder like I do with a sport route. And I think we can all create, what we want out of our different climbing objectives. They're all so arbitrary anyway that it's sort of what we create in our minds. But I just love the feeling of being on a sport route and finding that flow. And the flow doesn't normally happen for me in bouldering. It's more just this quick, you almost don't even know what happened. But I'm finding it's really fun. And I think part of it is different people to boulder with, finding those friends who really motivate you and push you. It's really fun to try the hardest moves you can possibly do, which you're normally not going to do on a sport route. I do think probably some of the hardest boulders I've done have been in the middle of sport routes or at the beginning or whatever it is. But I'm finding a lot of joy in bouldering for different aspects. As to the fear component, a big part of that is I'm not climbing on super tall boulders. I'm just not really willing to apply myself to things that feel really risky. I don't want to get hurt. I want to keep climbing. I want to be able to take care of my kid. And I'm just scared of really tall stuff. So you won't see me on any really impressive high balls. But I try and find a good middle ground of boulders that are an approachable height, that have, good landings, decent falls, or that the hard part is more closer to the ground and then the top out's easier. So it's we always want to work on our weaknesses, and that's really important. And I've done that and continue to do that. But also it's good to play into your strengths and set yourself up for success. And so I think that's what I try and do in bouldering. I'm not going to apply myself to something that, I'm super terrified of. If it's a safety issue, I'm happy to stay within my comfort zone.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a great, first of all, I share that. I really like having a rope on. I got my MAXIM Airliner ready to catch me even if I, fall from.
Yeah, the best of the best.
The best. Oh, by the way, when I got my new rope, it's got a little QR code where you're how do you uncoil this rope properly? And it's a video that you did. It was great.
In my backyard.
Yeah, just walking laps with a rope. You got your exercise and shooting the video.
It worked though, didn't it?
It did. It did work. But that's something that I've struggled with too, is I'll boulder in the gym, but when I go outside, I really like to have a rope on because the 30-foot fall doesn't scare me as long as I'm just bouncing on a rope, but a 5-foot fall off of a boulder scares me. So I've been trying. I've been pushing myself out there, like you said. It's like a little exposure therapy. I took a trip to Leavenworth and did some boulders and took some falls. But it's, as a route climber at heart, it's been hard for me to try really hard and put falling out of my mind on a boulder like I can do on a sport route, when I know if the falls are good and I've got an attentive belayer, you almost don't have to think about the fall if you're in that right zone,
Mm-hmm. Which I think is experience and exposure therapy, because a lot of people have the reverse where they don't want to take lead falls. That feels really scary. But
right.
It's how many times have you taken lead falls and, it's been everything's gone smoothly and well. And so that proves to you that it's safe and you feel comfortable. And So doing the same thing in bouldering, just like setting myself up for success. As cool as a boulder looks, if the landing is super scary and feels sketch, like that's not for me. So there's a lot of people doing really sick high balls out there, and I'll just admire them from afar.
That was a really fun conversation in the mental game there. I want to shift to our last chapter, which is purpose and things that you're passionate about outside of your own rock climbing. And I'm really inspired by you. You are involved in a lot of different causes as an advocate. You started a nonprofit organization and you've raised money for various different things. You're also a mom and have been writing and posting, I think, really thoughtful, eloquent, vulnerable things around that. So we could take this conversation in any number of ways. What would you like to focus on? What's bringing you a lot of purpose right now outside of your own climbing?
I mean, obviously my kid is the obvious answer. We've been in this really cool phase lately where she's just like changing so fast. We just finished potty training, and in that same week she learned how to ride her strider bike and loves it. And we are strider biking like hours a day. And I'm just thinking of this little person, and if we did anything 2 hours every day, like aside from the fact that I think rest is really important, just the amount of practice that is, like say you practice the piano 2 hours every day, you're going to get pretty good pretty fast. And that's what she's doing. And you're just watching it in this small person, and you're so involved in their process. And it's really cool to see her apply herself. And she just like wants to be on her bike all the time. And you hear about how proud parents are, and it's kind of gaggy, or, you know, you just can't really understand it. And the last few weeks I've been like, oh my gosh, I feel it. Like I understand what this means. So that's just been really fun to see her personality come out. Like she has a sense of humor. She's sassy. And those are qualities I love and are so fun to see in her. She's really into climbing at the moment. Like we had 2 walls in our basement, and we moved the lower angle wall to be vertical so that she can climb on it. And she just like wants to go down there and climb, and there's no pressure. It's nothing except just like having fun. And it's cool to see her just like explore different things. And I think the thing that I'm really proud of, and maybe this is like a reflection of something that I work on myself, is when she struggles, when she falls off her bike or whatever, she like either cries or doesn't, and then, you know, takes a minute and sniffles, and then she like gets back on her bike and keeps going. And that's nothing I did. It's just, I don't know. It's cool to see in your kid and to see how she wants to apply herself. And I think the reason it's so fun is being an athlete myself and like having experienced a lot of these emotions, or that struggle, or you fell and like now things are bleeding and it hurts. And do you want to try again, or do you want to like chill out and rest? And so it's just like a miniature version of a lot of the things that I enjoy and struggle with in life.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. Yeah, it's you're in that phase where just those changes come fast and furious. And I got to say, by the way, having a couple kids myself, potty trained and riding the strider before 2 years old is pretty epic. So way to go.
I mean, I'm with her all day, every day, pretty much. So, you know, there's a lot of things we're not doing. So I think that's something that's really important to me, is you just see on social media, like you see the highlights of everyone's life and you don't hear about the hard parts. And so I've tried really hard to post about those because everyone has them. And like the early phases of motherhood were really hard for me, and I didn't expect that. Like I've always wanted to be a mom, so I just expected I would thrive with a newborn, and I've always liked babies, so like why wouldn't I love the newborn phase? And it turned out to be a really hard phase for me, and I struggled a lot personally, and that was really challenging to expect yourself to thrive in an environment that you kind of crash and burn in. I'm sure a lot of parents can relate, but also, you know, you see everyone around you getting out and doing stuff with their baby, and, you know, I just didn't feel capable of I just wasn't thriving in the early days. And so now we are in this space where we're thriving, and that doesn't mean it's going to continue to be like that in every phase or every day. Like the other day we had a horrible day, but I just never want to paint my life as like, look, my kid's potty trained and riding her strider bike. It's like, Yeah, but the meltdowns and we have a million of our own struggles. And so just keeping all those things in perspective, and like everyone's doing the best they can with what they have and enjoying the parts that are fun. So it just comes with a lot of like mixed, you're always having something new thrown at you.
Yeah. Well, you got to celebrate those victories when you get them, because, 90% of the day is like hard and usually sleep deprived, and we're just chasing, at least my experience with my kiddos, and everybody's experience is different. But also, I'm glad that you noted that it's everybody is kind of going at their own pace, and it's something that I need to remind myself as a parent all the time as well, because it's not a competition. Like, I don't know any 15-year-olds that aren't potty trained, right? So it's like, yes, a kid is potty trained at 2 and some are potty trained at 5 or whatever, but it's like, at some point in time, everybody's going to be freaking potty trained. So like, let's not make it like more of a thing than it needs to be, but that
totally.
It can be hard as a parent sometimes, because you can, and as a climber, by the way, as a metaphor, because it's easy to fall into the trap where we're always comparing ourselves to where others are at.
Yep. I mean, like Larkin didn't sleep at all until she was like 15 months old. Like,
oh God,
up a million times the night, let alone sleeping through the night. So sleep was a huge struggle. And now it's like she's really addicted to the pacifier. And you're supposed to get rid of that at 9 months, and then a year, and then 2 years. And she's about to turn 2, and I do not see us getting rid of the pacifier. And you're just like, you know what? We're doing great at a lot of things. That is one thing that, that's a tough area for us. And we're just going to let it be for now. And like, she's probably going to need braces. I had to have braces twice, and I'm fine.
To bring it back and kind of wrap it up with climbing here, what is your pacifier in the climbing world?
I mean, I think just like a fun day out on a hard boulder or route with a close friend, where there's no pressure. It's just like, we're getting outside, we're going to have some heart-to-hearts, we're going to try really hard. And those days are just so soothing. I think they really fill you up. They remind you why you climb. And I think I'm having more fun than I've ever had in climbing. And part of it is just being able to enjoy those experiences rather than needing each day to be productive. I like to project, and so you're applying yourself to something each day you go out. But knowing that you can just go like have a fun day climbing, and there doesn't really need to be a specific objective or an outcome, that just being outside with a friend is enough. So that's my pacifier.
Cool, Paige. Well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciated this conversation. I'm psyched and motivated by it.
Thanks for the thoughtful questions.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Good luck with the momming, the Strider biking, and
fun to talk to another parent, and good luck with your project out there in the red.
All right, that clips the anchors on this one here with Paige Claassen. Man, I just found this convo to be so refreshing. I mean, she really seems to have a great perspective on this sport and where it fits into the bigger picture of life, doesn't she? I mean, she's psyched and she's driven, no doubt. She's achieving at the highest levels. But how cool that she can also like clock out at the end of the day and be fully present with her family or her sticks of butter or whatever it is that she's focusing on when she's not training or climbing. I love that. And for those of us, really all of us, honestly, who have a lot going on outside of our climbing, Paige shows that we can all just make it work if we embrace the right mindset and if we get focused with our time at the gym and at the crag. She shares a lot more on that, in fact, in a bonus episode that I just released. In it, Paige covers why she's drawn to test pieces put up by the likes of Chris Sharma and Tommy Caldwell, some climbs that are really hard for the grade, why she feels beginners are sometimes able to summon tryhard even better than the pros. I really loved her perspective on that. How she cuts the tension and the nerves when she's about to go for a big send, some like tricks that she uses there, how she uses activation points to prepare for climbs. I didn't even know what activation points were, so check that part out. And then lastly, she talks about her plans for sending 515 and so much more. You can get instant access to all of that right now at zero cost with a free trial over at patreon.com/thestruggleclimbing show, or right there in your Apple Podcast app if you're an iPhone person.
And you'll also, by the way, get instant access to more than 40 hours of other bonus content featuring Adam Andra, Chris Sharma, Nina Williams, Alex Honnold, and so many more, plus the pro clinics that we've done on Stronger Fingers with Dr. Tyler Nelson, Advanced Bouldering with Allison Vest, Moonboard with Ravioli Biceps, and Performance Hacks with Hazel Finlay, just to name a few. It's all there for just a few bucks a month or zero cost right now with a free trial, so you can check it out. Thank you so much for supporting the show if you can. I'm working really hard for you here. Huge thanks and appreciation to our show sponsors who have brought you this episode at zero cost. Check your show notes for links and special discounts from those guys that are only available to Struggle listeners. And also you can see all of the show's brand sponsors and special deals by just popping over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/deals. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. This show was produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by Glen Walker. Thank you, Glenn. You're awesome. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope your training and climbing are going great. And if you're struggling like me, well, just remember that the struggle makes us stronger. See y'all.